As House impeachment managers continue to lay out their case against President Trump, it's becoming clear their biggest obstacle just may be trying to keep the American people and the senators on the jury paying attention. If you've been tuning in at home, you'd be forgiven for nodding off occasionally, despite the gravity of the moment. Because with journalists blocked from bringing in their own cameras, the only view of the trial so far has been a single static shot of the Senate podium. Not exactly compelling TV. Even the senators in the room, whose job is to watch and listen, are having trouble. This sketch from inside the trial shows several of them standing behind their desks. And on Tuesday night, by CNN's count, as many as 20 senators had temporarily left the room. With some Republicans complaining that the Democrats' arguments are nothing new.
It's like Groundhog's Day all over again. Today, I'm expecting to hear just a repetition of what they said yesterday.
This is a trial on the impeachment of the President of the United States. It may not capture everyone's attention for the length of time that is required, but the standard shouldn't be whether it is capturing my attention. Our attention should be focused on this most serious matter because of the nature of the matter.
And with no guarantee that they'll get to question new witnesses later in the trial, impeachment managers have been leaning on the old ones who testified before the House to help make their case.
In a last-ditch legal defense of their client, the President's lawyers argue that impeachment and removal are subject to statutory crimes or to offenses against established law, that the President cannot be impeached because he has not committed a crime. This view is completely wrong. Professor Gerhardt succinctly captured the consensus view in his testimony.
Does a high crime and misdemeanor require an actual statutory crime?
No, it plainly does not.
So will any of this be enough to bring Senate Republicans on board? Joining me are Bina Venkataraman, the new editorial page editor of the Boston Globe. Congratulations, and it's great to meet you. Thanks for being here. Boston City Councilor Lydia Edwards, good to see you, Councilor. And Boston Globe columnist Scot Lehigh. Scott, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here. If I can start with you, has day one of procedural wrangling and a day and a half for the prosecutors, the House manager's case, changed the dynamic in any way, either in the Senate chamber or across America?
No. Unfortunately, I think there was the whole excitement about it starting, but at the end of the day, most people are still confused about what's going on. People think he's been impeached and he's done. A lot of people are still confused about what this process is, and honestly, a lot of people are doubtful that they're going to do anything.
A lot of people, even if they're watching TV, Fox News cut off their coverage at roughly 5 o'clock last night.
Surprise, surprise.
Well, regardless, that's a huge piece of the population.
You know, the way they're doing this, so they're laying the case out, and they're telling them what they're going to tell them, and they're telling them it again. They're hitting their recapitulation of all the big points. There's a lot of video screen. It's a made-for-the-American audience production, much beyond the audience just of the Senate. And I think if you watch it, it's just different snippets of the day. It's quite effective. I think
quite effective reading and moving pieces of the population.
Getting the message of a confusing storyline out in a clear way to the American people.
Do you agree with that?
Well, I think two things have changed here. One is that the American public is hearing this case being made, and there are indications, if you buy the polls, CNN polls, showing that the support for impeachment has gone slightly up. Maybe it's at 51%.
Removal, not just impeachment.
For removal, removal, yes, exactly. And so maybe that case that's being made, the public case that Adam Schiff and the other House managers are making, is piercing through a little bit. I'm not sure that kind of margin in the polls is enough to say. And the second is that what we're hearing is that many Republican senators didn't actually listen to the House hearings on this impeachment, and so some of them are hearing this evidence for the first time. So, and by virtue of some of the news sources that they watch as well, they're the ones watching Fox News and not necessarily having been followed.
But it seems to me they will go where their people are. And you know what I did when I got to work this morning, directed the two of you? I looked at the 10 trending stories on the Boston Globe. The lead story was about impeachment. The first story was about the 29 best new restaurants. This is what the readers decided. Delonte West, the former Celtic, something. I mean, on and on. Number 7 out of 10 this morning. That says something, does it not?
But if you look at the numbers on this, you now see a strong majority of people of almost every party. Republicans more like 48%, but overall, somewhere in the 70s, who want to see witnesses, who believe the Senate should call witnesses, and that's a very big change. because that's important here. If you were to get John Bolton in there, and if you were to get McElvaney in there to talk about what actually happened under oath, it could be a game changer. And all of a sudden you can't, I think there's going to be much more reluctance just to say we're going to broom this the way Mitch wants to if we have that many people who actually believe that we should hear from witnesses.
You're nodding and agreeing. I mean, you're a big-time lawyer, and obviously, I know, well, you're a lawyer.
Well,
I mean,
big-time lawyer.
A bigger-time lawyer than I. But obviously, witnesses are huge.
No, trial and process is huge. And so we're...
But there were 11 votes, 53 to 47, 11 times. 53 Republicans, 47 Democrats on the other side. Does that not, on procedure, does that not foretell the future?
There's a matter of fairness and a real understanding. He has been, what, if you will, indicted or impeached in one house. The trial is to happen someplace else. And I think the American public understands trial at a very basic level, which is there's a neutral judge, there's a neutral jury, and there's evidence. And so that fact that they're not even allowing evidence, witnesses, documents to come in, that is, I think, for a lot of people, simply not fair. There doesn't seem to be a real process actually happening and unfolding. So I think for many people, the want and the need is to have a true, fair, transparent process.
Which means witnesses.
It means a trial, which means witnesses, it means evidence, it means arguments on both sides.
Which is exactly what your editorial said a couple of days ago. And you added to his list of Mulvaney and Bolton, you added, I think, Lev Parnas and Barr. But you go on to say in your next day editorial something I found really interesting. You said the Senate and the Chief Justice must ensure that witnesses and evidence are actually heard. Suggesting to me, I hope, that the Chief Justice is not just intended to be a potted plant during this thing, which is the part he's playing so far.
Well, he has spoken up more than Chief Justice Rehnquist in the Clinton impeachment, if you remember that, but which is not saying a lot because basically Rehnquist sat there and everyone commented on his fashions of the day and his robes.
But less than, I read this morning, than the Chief Justice, whoever he was, during the Andrew Johnson.
Sure. And I think one thing that we're asking to see and hoping to see is Chief Justice John Roberts hold up some of the institutional norms of the Senate. And his minor comment sort of interfering in the quibbling that was happening between the House managers and the White House counsel was, I think, more about his offense, taking offense to the tenor of the conversation, the fact that they were insulting each other.
But are you saying, and I hope you're saying, that if it turns out there's a vote not to have witnesses, and he believes, as a jurist, that the only way a fair decision can be made is with witnesses, new witnesses, with additional documents, that he can order it?
We're sort of asking him to play that more muscular role. Whether or not McConnell will allow it to go forward, whether or not that he'll be willing to interfere.
He presides, not
certainly
Mitch McConnell.
presides. He certainly has an explicit right in the Constitution, one of the few explicit duties given to the Chief Justice, to play a role in ensuring the fairness of this procedure. So he very well could do that. And I think this also speaks to the sort of rock and hard place where McConnell is, given what Scott and Lydia said, in that the American public is recognizing 70% or upwards of 70% recognize that we need to hear witnesses, we need to hear new evidence for this to be a fair trial. But at the same time, you have the president tweeting during these proceedings, basically telling the Senate Republicans that he's watching and he doesn't want any new evidence or witnesses to be heard.
What do you think? What causes 4 senators, assuming the Democrats stay solid at 47, what causes 4 senators, Republican senators, to say, and the assumption is the bill will be next Friday, yeah, we need witnesses, at least some witnesses in this case. What happens between now and then?
What causes them to do that?
Yeah, what causes 4 of them to act like grown-ups and say, we want fairness, as you both are saying.
Right, they put country before party. And they say that if we truly want to demonstrate that he is innocent, or if we truly believe in this man or whatever, this process, we have to let the American people, and we have to let the process happen.
But don't you think something has to happen between now and then, maybe in that room or outside the room, to cause them to get religion on this issue?
Well, also political dynamics. Susan Collins in Maine, if she does not vote for witnesses, she's already in trouble. If she doesn't vote for witnesses, she will be in more trouble. Cory Gardner, Colorado, same thing. He's
How about our former governor? How about our former governor who excoriated Citizen Trump? Who is, he's almost 80 years old. I don't think he's running for the presidency at some point in the future. Why is Mitt Romney already not on board for a fair trial here?
I think the way, I don't know, Mitt doesn't have a huge backbone, but I think the way this works is you vote with your party on establishing the rules, and within that, and you give them that, and then within that template you say, but when it comes to a time to vote on the individual decision, that's where I may vote off. Mitt could do it, because he's from Utah, a state that is not horribly fond of Mr. Trump, but we know Mitt can rationalize anything, having seen him here, so he's not necessarily a pillar of strength on this.
Can we talk about the future just for a second? Virtually every Democrat who was here on a radio show during the impeachment hearings in the House was candid enough to say, yes, it could cost them in the November elections. This decision to go ahead with impeachment may mean that it helps ensure the re-election of Donald Trump. You may agree with that or not agree with that. But you had before you an infamous or famous front page editorial in April, I think, of 2016. Was it deportations about to begin? About your expectation, the editorial page's expectation, about what life under Trump would be. If he is acquitted and then reelected, what would that faux front page look like? I mean, would he not be emboldened in ways that are indescribable?
I think we are looking at a much darker fake front page, if you will, on Trump if we face re-election. And part of it is some of the less sort of obvious and sensational aspects of what he's doing, including stacking the federal judiciary with very partisan type judges, including some very unqualified judges by the American Bar Association's own designations. Some of these longer systemic changes that are going to have reverberations, across generations. And for that matter, his neglect of climate change. We've seen climate disasters taking an extraordinary toll in this country, financially and humanitarian-wise. And those kinds of problems, we're going to reach critical tipping points, and or he's going to seal in the future of this country.
I got to hold there because I want to come back to Massachusetts, a story closer to home. Governor Charlie Baker has been getting criticism this week for comments following remarks from Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley at the city's 50th annual MLK Memorial Breakfast. Here's some of what she had to say.
I am so tired of people saying that what is ruining this country is identity politics. No, it isn't. It is hate and white supremacy that is codified through legislation.
The Congresswoman received tons of applause, and after the cheers subsided, the governor said this in part.
The only thing I can add to that rant, okay?
Did say more, including that her point was, quote, so spot on. But his use of the word rant has been criticized by D.A. Rollins, A.G. Healy, and others. Today, the governor joined me and Marjorie Egan in our radio show to respond publicly to that criticism for the first time.
I heard from a couple people on my team that that the use of the word rant had upset a bunch of people. And I called the Congresswoman. She called me back, and I said, I'm very sorry that I stepped on a beautiful moment for you. And I apologized for the use of the word. I said it was a poor choice of words. But that I thought what she said was exactly right.
What was her reaction to your apology?
She accepted it.
What's your reaction? What did the governor have to say to the whole thing?
What he had to say on stage?
Both today and what he had to say on stage.
Sure. Well, I think the use of the word rant, it's a very loaded term, right? It implies anger. And there's a history of characterizing black women, black people in general, when they speak with passion, by calling it and casting it with this sort of terms of anger. And I think we all have to be really careful about that, particularly people in public office, how they use their platform and what kinds of terms they use. That said, it's quite possible, given the nature of what he said around that he really did admire her remarks and did want to compliment her. And it was sort of reflection of implicit bias coming across in his remarks. I think the apology was warranted, and I'm glad to hear the Congresswoman accepted it.
Counselor, what's your reaction, including to what he had to say today, quickly, if you can?
Well, if I was sitting on that stage, I would immediately thought that he had dismissed everything that I said, and considering that we were talking about race on Martin Luther King's day and celebrating his social justice fight, that his first word and his first thought was the word rant is not only just a poor choice, but people will question whether the character behind that choice. That being said, I understand he apologized, and I understand that the Congresswoman accepted that apology. But I think what I want to hear more from him is not just poor choice of words, I was wrong, I was dismissive, it will not happen again. That would be ideal.
15 seconds, Scott.
I think intent is the cornerstone of Western jurisprudence, and I think you always have to look for intent, and I don't think his intent was to disparage her. He gave her a nice round of applause. They seemed to be having a good time together. He apologized. I don't think the intent was in any way to be disparaging of her, so I think it's kind of much ado about nothing, honestly.
Scott, good to see you.
Very nice
Thanks
to see you,
much.
James,
Counselor,
as always.
appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bina. It's great to meet you. Good
Delight
luck
to
in
meet
work.
you.